The crystal glasses clinked softly as Maya carried her tray through the crowded dining room. She'd done this same walk thousands of times in the past 3 years, weaving between tables where people spent more on a single bottle of wine than she made in a week. Le Bernardin Noir wasn't just any restaurant. It was the kind of place where movie stars sat in corner booths, where business deals worth millions happened over dessert, where old families with inherited wealth celebrated birthdays that cost more than a car. Maya was invisible here. That's what being a waitress at a place like this meant. You smiled, you served, you disappeared. The guests never really looked at you. They looked through you, like you were part of the furniture. Sometimes she'd stand right next to a table for 30 seconds before anyone noticed her there, waiting to take their order. She didn't mind it most days. The money was decent. The tips from guilty rich people added up. And honestly, after everything she'd been through, having a steady job felt like a luxury in itself. But there were moments like right now when she'd catch sight of her reflection in one of the massive gold-framed mirrors that lined the walls. And she'd barely recognize herself. The girl in the mirror wore her dark hair pulled back tight, not a strand out of place. Her nails were painted a pale pink, perfectly maintained because the restaurant required it. The white shirt and black vest were spotless, pressed sharp enough to cut paper. She looked professional, presentable, completely forgettable. But if you looked closer, really looked, you'd see something the guests never noticed. Her fingers. They were strong, the tips slightly hardened. There were tiny scars on her knuckles from years of something the uniform didn't explain. These weren't the soft hands of someone who just carried plates. These were the hands of someone who built something, created something, worked towards something with fierce dedication. Maya, table 12 needs their wine. The manager's voice snapped her back to reality. She nodded, grabbed the bottle of red that probably cost $400, and headed over with her professional smile locked in place. It was a Thursday night, which meant the restaurant was full but not crazy. Weekends were chaos. Thursdays had a rhythm she could predict. By 9 o'clock, most tables would have their main courses. By 10, desserts and coffee. By 11, the last stragglers would finally leave, and by midnight she'd be free. Free to take the number 7 bus downtown, then transfer to the number 12 that went east. 45 minutes total if the buses were running on time, which they usually weren't. All to reach the old community center in a neighborhood most of the restaurant's guests would never set foot in. That's where the piano waited. It wasn't much of an instrument, honestly. The community center had bought it used about 15 years ago, and it showed. Some of the keys stuck. The middle C was slightly out of tune, no matter how many times the volunteer tuner tried to fix it. The bench wobbled if you sat too far to the left. The wood was scratched and worn, marked by decades of beginning students banging out their scales. But to Maya, it was everything. She'd started going there 3 years ago, right after she got the job at Le Bernardin Noir. The center stayed open until 2 in the morning for night shift workers who needed a place to go. There was a small gym, a library, some meeting rooms, and in the back corner, that piano. Most nights Maya had it all to herself. That's when she could finally breathe. When she could finally be herself. Her fingers would touch those worn keys and everything else would fall away. The aching feet from standing for 8 hours. The fake smile that made her cheeks hurt. The careful politeness that required her to say of course and right away and my pleasure, even when guests were rude or dismissive. All of it disappeared the moment she started to play. She'd taught herself mostly. Started when she was 7 years old on her grandmother's old keyboard. The kind with miniature keys that didn't sound quite right. But she'd loved it instantly. The way pressing down could create sound. The way combining those sounds made something beautiful. The way she could express things through music that she didn't have words for. By the time she was in high school, she was good. Really good. Her music teacher had called her a natural, said she had something special. She'd practiced for hours every day, dreaming of concert halls and recording studios and a life built around music. Then life happened, the way it does. Her mother got sick. Really sick. The kind of sick where hospital bills pile up faster than you can count them. Where someone needs to be home to help with medications and doctor's appointments and all the 1,000 small tasks that become impossible when your body stops cooperating. Her mother had always worked 2 jobs to support them, and suddenly she couldn't work at all. So Maya did what she had to do. She set aside the piano. She set aside the dreams. She got a job waitressing, then another job on weekends. She learned to smile when she was exhausted. She learned to be grateful for tips. She learned that dreams were luxuries and right now they needed to focus on survival. Her mother passed away 2 years ago. The grief had been crushing, a weight that made it hard to breathe for months. But even after, Maya kept working, kept going through the motions, because what else was there to do? She'd been in survival mode for so long that she didn't know how to be any other way. Except for those hours at the community center. Those were hers. Nobody at the restaurant knew about the piano. It wasn't something that came up in conversation. The other servers talked about their weekend plans, their dating lives, their families. Maya smiled and nodded but kept her own life private. What would she even say? That after serving wealthy people all night, she went to play a broken-down piano in a community center? That she'd rather do that than sleep? They wouldn't understand. How could they? "Maya, we need more bread at table 7. Another server rushed past her, arms full of plates. Maya grabbed a basket of fresh bread and delivered it with that same practiced smile. The night continued its predictable rhythm. Orders taken, food delivered, wine poured, plates cleared. She moved through it all with the efficiency of someone who'd done this job so many times she could probably do it in her sleep. Her mind was already at the piano, her fingers itching to play. Around 10:30, during a brief quiet moment, she stood at the service station folding napkins. Through the dining room, she could see the restaurant's grand piano. It sat on a small raised platform near the windows, a gorgeous instrument that cost more than she'd make in 5 years. Usually, they hired a pianist to play during dinner service. Soft classical pieces that added to the ambiance without demanding attention. Background music for people who weren't really listening. She'd never touched it. Never even been close to it except when serving nearby tables. But sometimes when she walked past, she'd imagine what it would feel like. Those keys would be perfectly balanced, each one responding with precision. The sound would be rich and full, not tinny like the community center piano. An instrument like that could make even a simple melody sound breathtaking, but that wasn't her world. Her world was the late-night bus and the wobbling bench and the slightly out-of-tune middle C, and honestly she was okay with that. She'd learned a long time ago that you couldn't have everything. Sometimes you just had to be grateful for what you could get. The clock finally hit 11:30. The last tables were finishing up. Maya's feet ached as she cleared dishes and wiped down her section. Just 30 more minutes. Then the bus. Then the piano. Then finally, she could stop being the invisible waitress and just be herself. Maya thought it would be just another Friday night. She was wrong. The restaurant looked different today. There were flowers everywhere. Massive arrangements of white roses and orchids that must have cost a fortune. Extra candles flickered on every table. The regular white tablecloths had been replaced with cream-colored silk ones that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Even the air felt different, charged with excitement and nervous energy. Le Bernardin Noir was celebrating its 50th anniversary, and apparently, no expense had been spared. The guest list read like a who's who of the city's elite. Politicians, celebrities, old money families who'd been coming here for generations. 300 people, all paying $500 a plate for this special evening. The staff had been preparing for weeks. Extra servers had been hired. The chef had created a special 7-course menu. And they'd flown in a famous pianist from Vienna, someone whose concerts sold out months in advance. His name was Werner something, and apparently having him play at your event was a very big deal. Maya had seen him briefly during setup. He was an older man, maybe in his 60s, with silver hair and an elegant suit. He'd inspected the piano carefully, adjusting the bench, testing the keys, nodding with satisfaction. This was his world. He belonged here in a way Maya never would. The evening started perfectly. Guests arrived in their designer dresses and tailored suits. Champagne flowed. The pianist played beautifully, his fingers dancing across the keys with the confidence of someone who'd performed in concert halls around the world. Maya recognized the pieces he played. Chopin, Debussy, some Mozart. Classic choices that pleased the crowd without challenging them. She was busy, constantly moving between the kitchen and the dining room. Carrying trays of appetizers, pouring wine, making sure water glasses stayed filled. Her section had 12 tables, and every single person seemed to need something at the exact same moment. But she kept her smile in place, moving efficiently through the chaos. Around 7:30 during the appetizer course, something happened. Maya was at the service station arranging dessert forks on a tray when she heard the music stop abruptly. Not a gentle ending to a piece, but a sudden, jarring silence. She looked up and saw the pianist standing, his hand pressed against his chest. His face had gone pale, almost gray. For a second, nobody moved. Everyone just stared, confused about what was happening. Then the pianist stumbled, catching himself on the piano bench. Someone screamed. Suddenly, everyone was moving at once. Mr. Castellano, the owner, rushed over. Other staff members ran to help. Someone called 911. The pianist was saying something in German, his breathing labored and uneven. Guests had stood from their tables, craning their necks to see what was happening. The paramedics arrived within minutes. They loaded the pianist onto a stretcher, asking him questions, checking his vital signs. The dining room had fallen into an eerie silence, 300 people watching as the ambulance crew worked. Then, they wheeled him out, the doors swinging shut behind them. And just like that, the carefully planned evening fell apart. Mr. Castellano stood near the stage, his face pale and sweating. He'd invested everything into this night. The flowers, the special menu, the famous pianist. This was supposed to be the event that secured Le Bernardin Noir's reputation for another 50 years. And now, halfway through the appetizer course, it was turning into a disaster. The guests were whispering to each other, unsure what to do. Some were already calling for their coats, ready to leave. The food in the kitchen was prepared and waiting. But what was the point? The whole evening had been built around this musical experience, this perfect combination of food and atmosphere, and live classical music. Maya watched from her spot near the service station. She felt bad for Mr. Castellano. He was a tough boss, demanding and particular about everything, but he genuinely loved this restaurant. He'd inherited it from his father and had spent his whole life making it succeed. Tonight was supposed to be his triumph. The other servers were standing around, waiting for instructions. Do they clear the appetizer plates? Do they serve the next course? Do they start processing refunds? Nobody knew what to do. Mr. Castellano was making his way to the microphone, probably to announce that the evening was over, when Maya felt something strange happen inside her. It was like a door opening, or a voice she'd been ignoring suddenly becoming too loud to ignore. Her eyes went to the piano. The beautiful Steinway Grand, sitting there on the stage like a promise. In 3 years of working here, she'd walked past it thousands of times. She'd dusted it, set drinks near it, admired it from a distance. But she'd never touched it, never let herself even imagine what it would be like to play it. But right now, with 300 disappointed people and her boss looking devastated, and that piano sitting empty, something shifted inside her. Her feet started moving before her brain could catch up with what she was doing. She walked across the dining room, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. The guests barely noticed her. She was just the waitress, probably going to clear some plates or refill some water. Mr. Castellano was at the microphone now, clearing his throat, about to speak. Maya reached him and said so quietly that only he could hear, "I can play." He looked at her like she'd suddenly started speaking another language. His eyes were unfocused, probably running through 1,000 calculations about how to salvage this disaster. "What?" "The piano," Maya said louder this time. Her voice was shaking but steady. "I can play it." Mr. Castellano stared at her. Behind him, the dining room was getting louder, people talking amongst themselves, some already standing to leave. He looked at Maya. Really looked at her, maybe for the first time in 3 years. She saw the moment he made his decision. He had nothing to lose at this point. "You can play?" he asked. "Yes." "Classical music?" Maya nodded. Her mouth was dry. What was she doing? This was insane. These weren't the friendly walls of the community center. This wasn't her wobbling bench and out-of-tune piano. This was 300 of the city's most important people, all expecting professional, world-class entertainment. But something in her wouldn't let her walk away. Maybe it was seeing that beautiful instrument sitting silent. Maybe it was the memory of all those nights at the community center, playing for an empty room, wondering if anyone would ever hear her. Maybe it was just that she was tired of being invisible. Mr. Castellano gestured toward the stage. "Then play," Maya's legs felt like water as she walked up the 3 small steps to the platform. Every eye in the room was on her now. She heard whispers, confused murmurs. Who was this, the waitress? Was this some kind of joke? She sat on the bench. It was perfect, not wobbly at all. The height was exactly right. She looked down at the keys, gleaming black and white, perfectly maintained and precisely tuned. Her hands were shaking as she placed them in position. This was the moment. She could still get up, apologize, say she'd made a mistake, go back to being invisible, safe, unremarkable. Or she could do the thing she'd been afraid to do for 8 years. She could play like she meant it. Play like someone was actually listening. She closed her eyes, took a breath, and let her fingers touch the keys. The first note rang out, clear and perfect. Then another. Then her hands began to move, and the music that had been trapped inside her for so long finally broke free. The first few notes came out tentative, uncertain. Maya's hands were shaking so badly she almost missed a key. She could feel 300 pairs of eyes on her back, could sense the confusion and skepticism radiating from the crowd. The waitress was going to play. This ought to be interesting, or embarrassing, probably embarrassing. But then something happened. Something she couldn't quite explain. Her fingers found their rhythm. The shakiness faded, and suddenly, she wasn't in the restaurant anymore. She was in that place she went to, late at night, when it was just her and the music and nothing else mattered. The place where she could finally breathe. She'd chosen Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. It was a bold choice, maybe even reckless. This wasn't simple background music. This was one of the most technically demanding, emotionally powerful pieces ever written. The kind of piece that could make or break a professional pianist's career. And here she was, a waitress with no formal training in years, attempting it in front of an audience that had been expecting a world-renowned performer. But it was the piece she knew best. The one she'd practiced 1,000 times at the community center, pouring all her grief and frustration and hope into those keys. She knew every note, every transition, every moment where the music swelled or softened. It lived inside her. Her hands moved faster now, racing across the keys. The restaurant's Steinway responded beautifully, every note crisp and clear, the sound filling the dining room in a way the old community center piano never could. This instrument was made for this music, and for the first time in her life, Maya had the chance to play it the way it was meant to be played. The dining room had gone completely silent. The whispers stopped. The clinking of silverware ceased. Even the servers who'd been moving around the room froze in place. Everyone was listening now, really listening. Maya's eyes were closed, her body swaying with the music. Tears started streaming down her face, but she didn't stop playing. She couldn't have stopped if she'd wanted to. 8 years of holding back, of being careful, of making herself small and invisible, all of it was pouring out through her fingers. She thought about her mother, about sitting at her bedside in those final months, holding her hand, watching her slip away. Her mother had loved music. She used to say that Maya's playing was better than any medicine the doctors could give her. On the worst days, when the pain was unbearable, Maya would hum melodies and her mother's face would relax, just a little. Her mother had made her promise something, right near the end. "Don't give up your music forever," she'd whispered. "I know you had to set it aside for me. But promise me you'll find your way back to it," Maya had promised. But then her mother died, and the grief was so heavy that Maya couldn't imagine ever playing again. When she finally did go back to the piano, months later, it felt different. Like she was playing for a ghost, for a dream that had already died. She'd convinced herself that this was enough. The late-night sessions at the community center, the private moments. She didn't need more than that. But she'd been lying to herself. Her hands crashed into the dramatic section of the concerto, the part where the music builds and builds until it feels like your heart might burst. She played with everything she had, not holding anything back. Not the rage she felt at a world that took her mother too soon. Not the loneliness of spending 3 years serving people who didn't see her. Not the fear that maybe she'd waited too long, that maybe her chance had passed. All of it went into the music. The piece moved into the softer middle section, and Maya's playing became tender, almost fragile. This was the part that always broke her heart. The melody was so beautiful it hurt, like remembering something precious you'd lost. Her fingers moved gently across the keys, drawing out every bit of emotion the composer had hidden in those notes. She could hear someone in the audience crying. The sound should have broken her concentration, but instead, it made her play even more honestly. Someone was feeling what she was feeling. Someone understood. The final section approached, the triumphant ending where all the themes come together. Maya's hands flew across the keyboard, her fingers moving so fast they seemed to blur. This was the hardest part, the section that required absolute precision and stamina. Her hands were starting to ache, her shoulders burning from the intensity, but she pushed through. The last chord rang out, powerful and clear, and then slowly faded into silence. Maya sat frozen at the piano, her hands still resting on the keys, her chest heaving. She was terrified to open her eyes, to face whatever was waiting for her. Had she been good enough? Had she embarrassed herself? Had she ruined Mr. Castellanos' special evening even more than it was already ruined? The silence stretched on. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3. Then the room exploded. The sound was so loud it startled her. Applause. But not the polite golf clap she was used to hearing after the hired pianist finished a piece. This was thunderous, overwhelming. People were on their feet, all 300 of them, clapping and cheering like they were at a rock concert, not a fancy restaurant. Maya opened her eyes and turned around slowly. What she saw took her breath away. People were crying. Not just one or two, but dozens of them. Tears streaming down faces usually composed and controlled. A man in an expensive suit was wiping his eyes with his napkin. A woman covered in diamonds had her hand pressed to her heart, her face transformed by emotion. Mr. Castellanos stood near the back, his mouth hanging open in complete shock. Next to him, the other servers looked equally stunned. These were people she'd worked with for 3 years, and they were staring at her like they'd never seen her before. Because they hadn't, Maya realized. They'd seen the uniform, the polite smile, the efficient waitress who never caused problems. But they'd never seen her. Not really. An elegant woman in her 50s pushed through the crowd, moving quickly toward the stage. She was tall and striking, with silver hair swept up in a sophisticated style, wearing a navy dress that probably cost thousands of dollars. There was an intensity in her eyes that made Maya nervous. The woman reached the stage and looked up at Maya with an expression that was hard to read. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" she asked, her voice carrying a slight French accent. Maya shook her head, still too overwhelmed to speak. "I'm Celeste Moreau. I direct the Conservatory of Music." The woman's eyes were glistening. "And in 30 years of attending concerts, I have never ever heard anyone play Rachmaninoff like that." "Where did you train?" "I didn't," Maya managed to say. Her voice came out scratchy. "I mean, I had some lessons in high school, but nothing formal. I mostly taught myself." Celeste looked at her like she'd just said she'd taught herself to fly. "That's impossible. I practice. Every night. At a community center." Maya was still trying to process what was happening. I love playing. I always have." More people were crowding around the stage now. Someone was taking pictures with their phone. Another person was filming. Maya saw flashes going off, heard excited chatter and questions being thrown at her from all directions. "What's your name?" Celeste asked. Maya Rodriguez." "Well, Maya Rodriguez," Celeste said, a smile spreading across her face. "I think your life is about to change in ways you can't possibly imagine." Maya woke up the next morning to her phone buzzing nonstop. Text messages, calls from numbers she didn't recognize, notifications lighting up her screen every few seconds. She grabbed the phone groggily, confused about what could possibly be so urgent at 7 in the morning on a Saturday. Then she saw it. The video had 15 million views. 15 million. Someone at the restaurant had filmed her entire performance and posted it online with the caption, "Waitress stuns elite restaurant with hidden talent." It was everywhere. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. News websites were picking it up. Entertainment blogs were writing articles. People were sharing it with comments like, "This made me cry," and "Most beautiful thing I've ever heard," and "Who is this woman?" Maya sat in her tiny apartment staring at her phone, feeling like the walls were closing in. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. She was just Maya, the waitress who played piano late at night when nobody was watching. She wasn't supposed to be viral. She wasn't supposed to have millions of people watching her. Her hands were shaking as she scrolled through the comments. Most of them were kind, supportive, amazed. But some were harsh, probably fake. The audio is definitely enhanced. She's probably had years of expensive training, and this whole waitress thing is just a publicity stunt. Those comments hurt more than she expected, because they were looking for a trick, an angle, a reason why her story couldn't be true. They couldn't accept that maybe, just maybe, talent and dedication could exist outside of expensive schools and perfect opportunities. By noon, reporters were calling. They wanted interviews, wanted to know her story, wanted to dig into every detail of her life. A producer from a morning show left 3 voicemails, asking if she'd appear on TV. A talent agent sent an email saying they could capitalize on this moment and make her a star. Maya turned off her phone and sat in silence. This was too much, too fast. Yesterday she was invisible. Today she was everywhere. And she had no idea how to handle any of it. A knock on her door made her jump. She looked through the peephole and saw Celeste Moreau standing in the hallway, looking completely out of place in Maya's rundown apartment building. Maya opened the door, surprised. "How did you find my address?" Maya asked. "I have my ways," Celeste said with a slight smile. "May I come in?" Maya let her in, suddenly embarrassed by her small studio apartment. The furniture was old, mostly secondhand. The walls needed painting. There was barely enough room for a bed, a tiny kitchen area, and a small couch. It wasn't much, but it was what she could afford. If Celeste noticed any of this, she didn't show it. She sat on the couch and got straight to the point. "Have you seen what's happening online?" Maya nodded. "It's overwhelming. I imagine it is." Celeste folded her hands in her lap. "Maya, I meant what I said last night. Your talent is extraordinary, and I want to offer you something. A full scholarship to our conservatory's master's program, housing included. We'd also connect you with one of the finest piano instructors in the country who's expressed interest in mentoring you." Maya felt dizzy. "I don't understand." "Why would you do this?" "Because talent like yours appears maybe once in a generation, and it would be criminal to let it go to waste." Celeste leaned forward. "You could compete internationally, record albums, perform in concert halls around the world. This is what you were meant to do." It was everything Maya had dreamed about when she was 17, before life got complicated, before her mother got sick, before she learned that dreams were luxuries you couldn't always afford. And now here it was, being handed to her like a gift. So why did she feel terrified instead of excited? "Can I think about it?" Maya asked quietly. Celeste looked surprised, but she nodded. "Of course. But don't think too long. Opportunities like this don't wait forever." She handed Maya a business card. "Call me when you're ready." After Celeste left, Maya did something she hadn't done in a long time. She went for a walk in her neighborhood. Not to the community center, not to the restaurant, just walking, thinking. The video kept playing in her mind, but not the performance itself. The comments, the reaction, the way people were treating her story like entertainment, like inspiration, like something to consume and then move on from. Nobody was asking what she wanted. They were just telling her what she should do, what this meant, where she should go from here. Her phone rang again. She'd turned it back on, hoping for a quiet moment, but apparently that wasn't happening. This time it was her coworker from the restaurant, Lisa. They'd worked together for 2 years, but had never been particularly close. "Maya, oh my God, have you seen it? You're famous." "I guess," Maya said, not sure how she felt about that word. "Everyone at work is talking about it. Mr. Castellano is thrilled. He's getting calls from people wanting reservations just because you work there." "Well, worked there. You're quitting now, right? I mean, you have to." Maya hadn't even thought about that. "I don't know." "What do you mean you don't know? You're going to be a concert pianist. Why would you keep working as a waitress?" It was a fair question, one Maya didn't have a good answer for. Over the next few days, the attention only intensified. News crews showed up at the restaurant. Reporters tracked down her old music teacher from high school, who gave a tearful interview about what a talented student Maya had been. Someone found medical records and wrote an article about her mother's illness, painting Maya as a tragic figure who'd sacrificed everything. That article made her angry. Her mother wasn't a tragedy. Those years taking care of her weren't some sad story for strangers to cry about. They were private, precious, complicated. They were hers. But that's what happened when you went viral, she realized. You stopped being a person and became a story, and everyone wanted to write their own version of it. The hardest part was going back to the restaurant for her next shift. She'd called Mr. Castellano, told him she still needed to work, at least for now. He'd sounded confused but said okay. When she walked in wearing her uniform, the other servers stared. Some seemed genuinely happy for her. Others looked resentful, like she'd been hiding something from them this whole time, keeping secrets, thinking she was better than everyone else. "Must be nice," one server muttered as Maya passed by. "Getting famous for doing your little piano party trick." Maya wanted to explain that it wasn't a trick, that she'd spent years working toward this, that the music meant everything to her. But what was the point? Some people would never understand. That night, after her shift ended, Maya went to the community center. The piano was there, same as always. Wobbly bench, slightly out of tune, scratched wood. But when she sat down and started to play, it felt like home in a way the restaurant's perfect Steinway hadn't. This was where she'd come to heal after her mother died. This was where she'd taught herself piece after piece, where she'd cried and laughed and poured her heart out with nobody watching. This piano knew her, and she knew it. A voice came from behind her. "You're really good." Maya turned to see a young girl, maybe 8 years old, standing in the doorway. She'd seen her here before, usually shooting baskets in the gym. "Thanks," Maya said. "Can you teach me?" the girl asked shyly. Maya smiled. It was the first genuine smile she'd felt in days. "Sure, come here." As the little girl climbed onto the bench beside her, Maya realized something. The fancy conservatory, the concert halls, the fame, none of that was what she'd fallen in love with. She'd fallen in love with this. The music itself, the way it connected people, the way it made you feel less alone. Maybe that's what she needed to figure out. What did she actually want underneath all the noise and expectations and opportunities? Who was she when nobody was watching? 3 weeks. That's how long Maya gave herself to make a decision. 3 weeks of working her shifts at the restaurant, playing at the community center, and trying to figure out what her life was supposed to look like now. The media attention had calmed down a bit, though people still recognized her sometimes. A woman at the grocery store asked for a selfie. A teenager told her the video made him want to learn piano. Small moments that felt surreal but also kind of nice. Celeste had been patient, checking in once a week but never pushing too hard. The offer still stood. Full scholarship. Professional training. A chance to become the pianist Maya had dreamed of being when she was younger. But something was holding her back, and she couldn't quite name it. On a Wednesday evening, Maya walked into the restaurant for what she thought would be a normal shift. But Mr. Castellano called her into his office before she could even put on her apron. She expected him to finally ask when she was leaving, to start looking for her replacement. Instead, he handed her an envelope. "What's this?" Maya asked. "Open it." She did. Inside was a check. Her hands started shaking when she saw the amount. 6 months of her salary, maybe more. "I don't understand," she said. Mr. Castellano leaned back in his chair. He looked tired, but there was something soft in his expression she'd never seen before. "After your performance, a guest approached me. They didn't want to be named. Said they wanted to help you, to give you time to make the right choice without money being the deciding factor." Maya stared at the check. "Someone just gave me this? A stranger?" "Not a complete stranger. Someone who was there that night. Someone who was moved by what you did." He paused. "Maya, in all my years running this restaurant, I've seen a lot of talented performers. But what you did that night, it wasn't just technical skill. It was real. It was honest. People felt something." Maya's eyes filled with tears. She'd been so focused on the chaos and the pressure that she'd almost forgotten why she'd walked up to that piano in the first place. Not for fame or opportunity, just because the music needed to be played and she was the only one there who could play it. "There's something else I need to tell you," Mr. Castellano continued. "You're the best waitress I've ever had. Reliable, professional, kind to the other staff. If you decide to stay, your job will always be here. But Maya, and I mean this, if you decide to leave, that's okay too. Actually, it's more than okay. It's what you should probably do." "You're firing me?" Maya asked, confused. "No, I'm giving you permission to go." He smiled, and it transformed his usually stern face. You've been taking care of other people your whole life. Your mother, the customers here, everyone but yourself. Maybe it's time you did something just for you. Maya left his office in a daze. She went through her shift on autopilot, her mind spinning. That night, instead of going to the community center, she went home and sat in her small apartment staring at the check, thinking about everything that had happened. She thought about her mother, about that promise she'd made. Her mother hadn't just asked her to go back to music. She'd asked her to live fully, to not let fear or guilt or the weight of the past keep her small. She thought about the little girl at the community center who'd asked for lessons, about how the music had connected them instantly, two strangers finding common ground in melody and rhythm. She thought about that moment on stage, when she'd stopped being invisible and let herself be seen, how terrifying it was, but also how alive it made her feel. The next morning, Maya called Celeste. "I want to accept your offer," she said, "but I have some conditions." They met at a coffee shop. Celeste listened carefully as Maya explained what she wanted. She'd go to the conservatory, work with the mentor, learn everything she could. But she also wanted to volunteer at the community center, teaching piano to kids who couldn't afford expensive lessons. She wanted to stay connected to where she came from, to remember why music mattered in the first place. "It's not just about performing in concert halls," Maya explained. "It's about what music does for people, how it helps them process things they can't put into words, how it connects us. I don't want to lose that." Celeste was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled. "You know, most young pianists who get this opportunity are only thinking about their career, their fame, their success. You're different. That's probably why you play the way you do. Is that a yes?" Maya asked nervously. "It's absolutely a yes." Maya gave her 2 weeks' notice at Le Bernardin Noir. Mr. Castellano threw her a small goodbye party, and this time, her co-workers seemed genuinely happy for her. Even the ones who'd been resentful at first had softened. Lisa hugged her and said, "Go be amazing. But don't forget about us regular people when you're famous." "I could never forget this place," Maya said, and she meant it. The restaurant had been more than just a job. It had been her stability when everything else was falling apart. It had taught her resilience, patience, and the value of showing up every day even when you didn't feel like it. On her last night, Mr. Castellano asked her to play one more time. The dining room was full, but this time Maya wasn't nervous. She sat at the piano and chose Debussy's Clair de Lune, one of her mother's favorite pieces. It was gentler than Rachmaninoff, more delicate but no less emotional. As she played, she didn't think about the future or worry about the past. She just let herself be present in the moment, feeling the keys beneath her fingers, hearing the beautiful sound filling the room. When she finished, the applause was warm and genuine, and Maya stood and bowed, not as a waitress or as a viral sensation, but just as herself. The next Monday morning, Maya walked through the doors of the conservatory for her first day. The building was intimidating, all marble floors and high ceilings and the sound of music coming from practice rooms. She felt out of place in her simple jeans and sweater, surrounded by students who looked like they'd been born into this world. But then she found her practice room, sat at the piano and placed her hands on the keys, and suddenly, she was home. The work was harder than anything she'd ever done. Her mentor was demanding, pushing her to technical perfection while encouraging her to keep the emotional honesty that made her playing special. There were days she wanted to quit, days she felt like she didn't belong, days she missed the simplicity of just being a waitress. But there were also days of breakthrough, days when a difficult piece finally clicked, days when she performed for small audiences and saw tears in their eyes, days when her students at the community center mastered something new and looked at her with pure joy. 6 months later, Maya performed her first real concert. Not at a fancy restaurant or a viral moment, but a proper recital hall with people who'd bought tickets specifically to hear her play. She was terrified backstage, her hands shaking just like that night at Le Bernardin Noir. But when she walked onto the stage and saw the crowd, she noticed something. There in the third row sat Mr. Castellano and several servers from the restaurant. In the back, she spotted some of her students from the community center with their families. And in the front row, Celeste sat next to an empty seat, a single white rose placed on it, a tribute to her mother. Maya sat at the piano, looked out at all these people who'd been part of her journey, and smiled. This wasn't about being famous or proving anything to anyone. This was about doing what she loved, what she was meant to do, surrounded by people who believed in her.